안녕하세요. To our beloved panels, good morning. We are the group Z3072 and our study is titled 안녕하세요, a correlational study on the language influence of K-pop to the speaking competence of the students. To begin with our statement of the problem, our paper talks about the ability to communicate effectively across cultural barriers has become a crucial skill. So it's not just about speaking correctly and being understood when it comes to being a skilled speaker, but it's also about being believed and appreciated. Inequality or linguistic skill constantly expose themselves in the market of daily contacts. Our people also talks about the influence of K-pop obsession to the speaking competence of the students. So we all know that today the Korean wave has been described in numerous ways. The very popular works contributing to the development of the Korean wave are entertainment-oriented genres such as Korean dramas, K-pops, and Korean cinema. Our paper also identifies and assesses the factors that influence the speaking competence of the students. So there are some underlying factors that influence the speaking competence of the students, which will be discussed in the RRL sections. So fans not only consume a wide range of Korean wave entertainment content, but they also engage in Korean culture through their food, the language, and traditional activities. So for the review of related literature, we have here the first one, the Linguistic Relativism Theory of Edward Sapir-Whorf. So, semantic categories of one's native language influence thought, and that as a result, speakers of different languages think differently. So, we all know that language is an important tool to unravel our social life. Every language shows a typical symbolic world that depicts reality of mind, inner experiences, and the need for users to think, look at the environment and the universe around it in different ways, and therefore they behave differently. Now, speaking competence can be achieved and greatly influenced with the language a learner may hear or encounter. So, enable for the learner to be competent in speaking, factors such as age of the learner, learner's motivation, learner's native language, and the enjoyable learning process must be considered. Next, we have the speaking model. Communication in a speech event is closely related to factors outside the language, such as where, when, who are the speakers and their opponents, the content of the speech, the purpose of the speech, the intonation of speech, included in related to psychiatric conditions of the speaker. Now, Delheims 1972 argues that communication in a speech event is closely related to factors outside the language, such as where, when, who are the speakers and their opponents, the contents of the speech, the purpose of the speech, the intonation of the speech. It is included in related to psychiatric condition of the speakers. Next one, we have here the speaking competence. So speaking is an action that involves the mechanics such as pronunciation, grammar, and vocabulary. It is the speaking is the correct use of words in the correct order with the correct pronunciation. It can be concluded that speaking is more than just producing sounds. It is an activity which involves three areas of knowledge, namely the area of mechanics, the functions, and social and cultural rules and norms. Now, for the first indicator of our speaking competence, we have here grammar. So grammar is essential for understanding the structure of a foreign language. Grammatical competence in the context of learning a foreign language is a set of theoretical knowledge or rules. and language skills that are required and sufficient for students to construct correct sentences, understand them, monitor grammatical errors, make judgments about correct and incorrect linguistic forms, and complete language testing tasks. Next one, we have the vocabulary. So students who learn utilizing a social media networking technique improve their vocabulary mastery by encountering words in unexpected contexts, which helps them learn more about words. So vocabulary learning necessitates both theoretical and practical skill on the part of the students. Next, we have here the fluency. Okay, fluency. So we associate fluency with being able to converse comfortably and easily in another language in everyday discourse. Fluency is proven by a speaker's ability to express meaning without too many false starts or hesitation. So moving on to pronunciation. Repeating sounds and correcting them when they are produced incorrectly is how pronunciation is learned. When students begin learning to pronounce words correctly, they develop new habits and overcome challenges caused by their original language. According to Yates 2002, pronunciation is the production of words that are employed to convey meaning. Now, for the last one here, we have the comprehension. So, speaking a language entails more than simply knowing the linguistic components of messages, and developing language abilities entails more than the grammatical comprehension and vocabulary memorization. So that's for the speaking competence. I will now give the time to my partner for the introduction of the language influence.
So to continue the review of related literature, I will introduce to you the last one, the language influence. Now we all know that Korean pop culture has swept the globe in popularity over the last 2 decades. The number of the admirer of the Korean pop culture grows around the world, and the number of the researcher on fan activities grows as well. One factor of language influence is the age of the learner. Some academics created models that predicted how long it would take to become competent in a language and when the optimal time to begin learning would be. The ability to learn a new language is at its peak until the age of 18. However, Smith 2018 stated that learning should begin before the age of 10. Next factor is the learner's native language. The native language plays a vital influence in the acquisition of a second language. It can have a beneficial or negative impact on the learning process. International funds are non-Korean funds who, despite the fact that their native language is not Korean. The third one is the learner's motivation. Motivation is defined as the combination of work and the desire to reach the language learning objectives, as well as the positive attitude about language learning. School Tungaram et al. Stated that learning Korean has recently received a lot of attention and has become one of the hot subjects in the world of language learning. Now we are down to the last factor of the language influence, the enjoyable learning process. Saito et al. 2018 stated that enjoyment in language learning helps the learner better process, acquire the target language. It is positively mediated by friendly relationship with peers, amusing, helpful, and encouraging teachers, and positive classroom atmosphere with engaging and suitably challenging classroom activities.
Let's move on to the next chapter, Please Study, which is the methods. In this chapter, I will going to discuss the intended research participants, materials, instruments to be used, designs and procedure of the study. So this study is aimed to determine if there is really a significant relationship between language influence to the speaking competence of the students, especially to those students who are learning Korean language. Probably the informants of this study will be the selected junior high and senior high school students in any public or private schools within Tagum City, Davao del Norte that is currently enrolled this school year. Since this is a quantitative correlational research, researchers will use the stratified random sampling as to determine the sample of the study. So the stratified random sampling is a small group referred to as a sample size, which is a subset to the population that is used to represent the entire population. So now let's move on to the research instruments. Questionnaires for this study will be a researcher-made questionnaire. Probably there will be two sets of questions to assess. First is the independent variable, which is the language influence, with 4 indicators, namely age of the learner, learner's native language, learner's motivation and enjoyable learning process. And for the dependent variable, we have the speaking competence that has 5 indicators, namely grammar, vocabulary, pronunciation, fluency, and comprehension. Due to this world pandemic, researchers cannot gather information through face-to-face. Thus, an alternative way in disseminating questionnaire is through Google Form. And this quantitative non-experimental research utilizing correlational technique, which investigates the relationship between the independent variable and dependent variable without any research bias. All the data of this study determining and calculating the percentage and mean values is through the use of statistical tools. It will also get the equality proportion of 2 variables. So now I will going to discuss to you the intended tools for this quantitative correlational research. First, we have mean. In mean, it will be used to determine the level of the language influence and the speaking competence of the junior high and senior high school students. And for the standard deviation, it will be measured the dispersion of data set relative to its mean. So it provides an indication how far the individual responses to question deviate from the mean. And the last one, we have person R. In this statistical tool, it will measure the statistical relationship or association between 2 continuous variables. And that would be all. Thank you.